And it looks like we're live, and I definitely didn't have any technical issues at all this morning that had any impact on this at all. I'm not muted. The stream isn't muted. Nothing was unplugged or chewed on by cats who happened to rip it out, and that definitely didn't happen. I'm going to just keep telling myself that because it's a lot less painful to say out loud. It's a good thing they're adorable. Yeah. More importantly, what's up, everyone? I'm Airier, and today we're looking more Fan with Too Much Time's next episode of Star Wars for Warhammer 40K, episode 29, Hope is the First Step. People in the chat were commenting, actually, they were commenting with a lot of R's. It's kind of weird. And that people were talking about how this is a really great episode. I mean, so far that would be every episode, so I'm not really seeing a difference here, but we'll see what happens. Otherwise, I have no idea what's going to get into here. I took the screenshot by just going to a random image and taking pictures without listening to the audio because without headphones, I can't hear shit. Granted, with headphones, I also am accused of not hearing shit, so probably not the best brag there. More importantly, we're going to start on up. And before I forget, haha, yes, that's the reason I'm all to the side, because I can just do that. Nice. And Claremont, you're saying in the chat, I just have to wait for the Comcast technical problems. Yep. Just drink to forget. Drink to forget. You know what? I actually thought I'd burn myself for a second there after I was mid-sip and then realized, oh, no, it's the perfect temperature. I didn't fuck up. We're off to a great start. When's the fucking going to make my Comcast issues actually happen? Nah, whatever. We'll see what happens. Which will probably be Comcast. Either way. I thought I started to this point. Awesome talent of Michael Wilson. Ooh, more people bringing me in. Presents Star Wars Warhammer 40K. What is that song in the background? I don't think I recognize it, but it sounds familiar. Episode 29. Ooh. Hear the strings coming in right after the bass drop. I love the audio he chose. Also, I don't know if I let Fan know that I was doing this. It'll be a surprise then. Hope he's not sick again. The first... Why did it gray out and then ungray out? Step. 3 dots. I know it says hope is the first step, but how the hell are we talking about hope and it sounds that ominous? Because if this is a continuation, if hope is the first step and there's a single period, that's just, okay, it could be bad, but we need to try. Hope is the first step followed by 3 dots usually implies, and then something worse happens. I mean, it's not like this is a 40K series, otherwise that would be horrible. Oh no. It's too bad Fan missed this.
Desperation had blanketed the battlefield.
I have so many jokes I can make now that he's not here.
As thick and noxious as the columns of black smoke which strafed across the shattered avenue. Deadly sisters of the Imperial faith butchered and burned their way up the clone lines.
Okay, so we're starting off immediately with the sisters fighting the clones, so we might have Rambo clones somewhere, unless Sando isn't currently on screen and he's somewhere else, and this is just the red shirts. Does it count as a red shirt if they only have bits of red armor? Or is that more orange? It's at that middle ground where I could see it go either way. Also, hey, Fan is here! Well, I guess I need to not make a few jokes that would be kind of sus if I said them. That definitely wasn't on my mind. I didn't have a list of them that I need to just quickly delete off screen because that isn't getting deleted. Nothing happened here. Nope, no, nothing to see.
And the clones responded with roars of defiance and lots of missiles and mortars.
Ooh.
But the results were far from deadlocked. Both sides had only ever known war. Both sides had become utterly dedicated weapons of their state.
Huh. You know, when you put it like that, it actually kind of is a little surprising that they are more or less in the same position here. Granted, for the clones, it's much shorter time period, but for the 40K, mostly because of rejuvenation treatments, if they survive long enough to get that, they probably become canonists. It does kind of feel like, yeah, between the sisters and the clones, they are basically on the same level of these are the soldiers who exist only for war. There is nothing else. I wouldn't even say that of the Imperial foot soldiers, just because the army does other things. Mostly garrisoning worlds where they get eaten by fauna that's trying to kill them, but technically that is different.
But the clones were barely teenagers, and the sisters were not.
Oh yeah, they're all really
Young as 20 standard
Sped
years,
up aging.
some as old as 150.
That previous mention about rejuvenation treatments. Goddamn. Also, when the youngest sister is still 5 years older, probably than most of the clones. Yeah, the Star Wars side is the one using child soldiers. Are they accidentally out-eviling the Imperium of Man? They've been doing that a lot. Huh.
And most varied densely between them. The daughters of the Emperor did not lack for time held within the forges of unceasing war.
Creepy.
And most were cruelly tempered by it already.
Yep.
One side bore a distinct weapons and experience advantage, which was proving difficult to overcome as...
You know, they have both the weapons and the experience. All they need now is the numbers, and it's not even a fight.
Sando was sadly learning.
Okay, so Sando is still in this one.
He and a line of hastily assembled troopers were desperately trying to hold back the advancing Sisters of Battle, their blasters hot in their hands, even as they sought to discard them for heavier weapons.
Oh?
In this, Sando had been fortunate. His long-barreled blaster rifle slung over his shoulder, enabling him to securely hold the DC-17 grenade launcher configuration he had been loaned by Sev before he and the sniper had been separated.
I'm going to say it once and I'll say it again. Grenades are broken. I'm not sure when the first time I said this, but I'm sure I've said it sometime because they really are. In 10th, they're a lot better than 9th and 8th, but I'm just going to ignore how that used to be. But yeah. Also, according to Fan, and you're really starting to understand why the Galactic Empire could only last around 20 years. What? Oh, and there's a previous comment right above that. And when you actually see how much damage, how many alien species the Galactic Empire destroyed in 20 years versus the Imperium in 10,000. Yeah, Fan is making a good point. The Empire is just not nearly as good at genocide as the Imperium of Man. How is it looking like the Imperium is the good guy still? It's really just in this time period. If they had come at any other time, it wouldn't be the case. But they chose the one time where somehow they come off as the good guys. That is weird. It's not like they're good. They're horrible here, too.
Stood in a dense mob, crowding over each other on a slope of slag and stretched broken steel. Behind them were the remaining ATTEs of the Vanguard, blasting and firing away as best they could with their heavier weapons.
Also, Josh Tompkins won. Thank you very much. And two, not surprising, some of the experiments Plagueis did would make bile What? I don't know a lot about what Plagueis did, but I know that the general consensus for the people who read the book was Palpatine was in the right on this one. Okay. Yeah. And Hobbit. Fan was saying Galactic Empire was worse than 40K? Really? I guess I missed that. He wanted to set it above where I could actually read the old comments. Oops.
Before them, the screaming advance of the Sisters of Battle. Their forces holding sword and mace aloft, some carrying flamethrowers, and others bearing what Sando could only describe as super flamethrowers.
Heavy flamers,
it was these that he and the others targeted first.
I wish they weren't so
Some
bad
of the
in 10th edition.
ATTEs had the good sense to prioritize those targets as well. And the worst of the fire-flinging units were successfully pinned down or blown away before they could come into effective weapons range. The others, however, were not so easily stalled. Grunting, screaming, and singing in voices meant for murder, the mob of armored ornate butchers came forward with blazing and sparking weapons of archaic war clutched in their hands.
Probably literally, too.
Swords of lightning flashed, turning the dwindling rain into hissing mist. Maces crowned in coronas of fire thrummed in the air as their wielders and their sisters stomped upon and shattered the dead and dying in their path. Sando put his exceptional training and instincts to the test, pulling the trigger on his launcher and firing 400 credits worth of explosive death.
That's a very unique thing to point out here. I mean, on the one hand, having someone talk about the creds worth of explosive death is interesting because I'm not sure if he's talking about the individual grenade shot or the grenade cannon itself that he's using to fire that. Either way, though, it's unique because I don't think Fan has attributed a price value to anything prior. So it's kind of unique to me just because it's the first time it's been mentioned. And wow, Fan is writing a big essay I need to read quickly. Honestly, it's the guy writing the story. I want to know what he thinks on this. And before I lose it, yeah, Airier, the Galactic Empire was definitely, or debatably, more hostile and violent than the Imperium. Really, more violent. Hostile? Maybe, because it's just general malevolence on the Imperium side, but hostile and violent together. Wow. A lot of what makes the Imperium so insane is that it takes to hold its borders, but that was not the case. For Palpatine's empire, which had no large enemies outside of itself and its own rebels, it was an extremely hostile empire that was dominant in its empire, and its genocides had no scripts of justification behind them. In many ways, the Galactic Empire was worse than the Imperium. It just did not last a tenth the time. I mean, I don't even think a tenth the time is accurate. It's like 1,000th of the time. They did 20 years. Imperium was around for 10,000. I don't do math well. That might only be 10,000th of the time. 5,000th? Yeah, by 5,000th. I don't math well. I'm sorry, Warrior. You said the math that Fan put out is it cost $400,000 to fire this weapon for 12 seconds. God damn, Fan, you are giving them some expensive weapons. Or inflation is horrible on the Empire side. Sorry, nope. Still Republic. Gotta remember that part.
Straight into the armored face of a sword-wielding warrior, blowing most of it away.
Damn.
The woman fell,
the warriors are usually
still
sergeants,
kicking as she tried to continue her charge, and was trampled by the sister behind her, who crawled over the thundering hymn of hatred.
Yep.
Sando's hands moved quickly, sliding the next to last grenade in his arsenal into the weapons chamber, but the sister coming for him moved even faster. He ducked her horizontal swing, ignoring the two clones to either side of him, both of whom seemed to burst and blow apart like party poppers as they were struck by the arc of her weapon's attack. Instead of dying or...
Okay, I don't usually polish this for the art, except for all the times I do. I'm going to ignore that. Goddamn, Fan, you found some really nice art for the sisters. Not just because it's pretty lady, but also because I love the detail, the art behind them, the halo glowing. Still can't get that effect down, and I don't even know what it is behind them. Almost like an orc war boss, maybe, because of the color pattern. Well, it's all gray and black, so I can't really say color, but you know what I mean. Also, Josh Tompkins said it was a TF2 joke. See, that would be the thing. I've never played TF2. I played the inferior copy Overwatch, and I regret that. That's on me.
Or noticing their deaths, Sando bit and pierced his own lip, hardly holding himself back from the suicide of shooting her with his grenade launcher at point-blank range.
Just to clarify, he means shooting someone with an explosive at point-blank range again. He has already done that. And he just got a little disoriented.
Rising in a rush of Stroyer elbowed the woman's helmet as hard as he could, his white shell cracking as it jarred her ceramite chin. She staggered back slightly, recovering swiftly as Sando slid the handle of his DC-15 into his waiting grip, using his shoulder strap to steady the long barrel.
Is he gun-fooing
His muscles knotted and burned as he hefted the weapon with one arm and jammed its nozzle into the crease between her shoulder and breastplate. He had milliseconds to act, and luckily, the blaster had already been set to maximum output.
He is actually gun-fooing this, and it looks like my connection's going wonky. Well, that's going to be awkward. And ooh, a guy under the bridge, one, thank you too, with the Pirate Empire's pal pulling all the strings, and the bootleg tinfoil the droids are made of. Star Wars economy is straight out of Looney Tunes. Yeah, Yeah, honestly, their economy is more or less, we need an excuse, and then they run with it. You don't ask, you just deal with it. Oh, God.
And as he pulled the trigger, a bright blue flash filled the shoulder of her armor, and the warrior released an agonized scream as she began to convulse at the end of his rifle.
Damn.
Her voice was terrible to hear, but far worse were the death cries of his brothers, and Sando spared her no pity as she tried to pull back off his barrel. The clone keeping the pressure on and firing again and again. The armored sister lost control of her weapon arm, the limb spasming before going limp and releasing her firing mace. Letting the active weapon fall to the broken steel beneath them, burning and pulsing with deadly technology as it rolled down toward the base of the slope they stood on. She made to reach for Sando with her one good arm. Her hand formed into a vicious claw meant to grab and break the white armored body of the clone.
Power armor probably could.
But he stepped inside of her grip, shrugging her hand off as he slid one of his feet behind hers and shoved the woman's flailing bulk backward. The sister fell hard and slid partway down the slope on her back, clawing at the broken ground with her good arm before Sando silenced and stilled her with a blast from his grenade launcher.
What was that about point-blank grenade launchers being a bad idea again? Dear God. This guy is literally insane. And Fane just said, ion-charged blaster cannons are very nice weapons in their context. Oh, because they are disrupting the power... Because they're ion-charged blaster rifles, they don't actually even need to break the armor. The more advanced the armor is, the more weak it is to this specific type of screw you, you're frozen in place. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that because I was so used to them just having just straight up burning effect. Yeah, because they're fighting droids, things that are more technologically advantageous are actually at a disadvantage here. Not to damage, but to being frozen in a combat situation, which is probably worse than just being shot. Because if you're shot, it's bad, but the Imperium specializes in, well, fuck it off and get over it. As opposed to this, where the armor is literally trapping you in place, and that's why she was shivering, shaking, and convulsing, because the armor was fucking around. Okay, that makes more sense. They literally just lucked into the best possible type of weapon here. It's probably one of the ways Fan was balancing this in also a way that made sense because they're fighting droids. So of course their weapons are meant for technological enemies.
But even with that, the work was far from done. He had hoped that their defense would shove the sisters back to their own lines, but as it was, they had barely forced them down the slope, and already the bloody Imperials were rebounding. Sando let his blaster rifle hang from its strap, reloading his launcher before tapping his helmet and activating his comm channel. He hoped that now that the rain had died down to a drizzle, and the main column of the Republic forces would be closer than before, someone, somewhere, would hear him and help them before it was too late. Vanguard frontline needs reinforcements! We are being overrun! Repeat, we are being... He began to report before cutting himself short to grab his grenade launcher with both hands. They were upon them again! He fired between two running Imperials, knocking them both aside and hoping he had done more than stagger them. His next act was to throw his launcher into the face of another, blinding the growling warrior woman enough to duck the horizontal slash of her sparking sword. As he handled his DC-15 once more and jammed it into the joint of her sword arm, now swung wide. He fired, once more disabling the targeted limb, though the sister did not release her weapon as the arm went limp. Her servos jostling and seizing as she screamed fury into his face. He tried to fire again, but the armored joint he had targeted locked up and broke the barrel of his entrapped weapon. Releasing his now useless blaster rifle, Sando spun around and took her weapon arm by the wrist just as she grabbed the back of his armor with her free hand. He twisted free her burning weapon with a hard, wrenching motion, catching it out of the air before it finished falling. Ignoring the scorching heat he felt in his hands as he was yanked back, Sando thrust behind himself with his now stolen sword and impaled the woman through the chest with it.
I'm sorry. So let me see if I get this entire confluence of events straight here. They charged in, got in, beat away his weapon that he threw at one of them, Somehow they caught it and snapped it while they spun at him. He knocked the sword out of the air, grabbed it, considering he got burned. So he grabbed it by what is either the blade or close enough to it that it could still burn him, shoved it behind him to do a reverse behind the back kill to the enemy. I was calling this guy Rambo. I did not realize this guy is very much stronger than Rambo. I mean, dear God, this is... I thought it was Gun Fu earlier. No, this guy's going full, like John Wick would give a very proud clap going, okay, my man. Also, that's as close to a Keanu Reeves impression as I can do. As you can tell, it's not very good. Ah, God damn, fan. Really good choreography on that one. Oh, God. And Omni Comics and Sarah Faustin. Is it bad just seeing you live makes me smile? I love just watching your videos when your days are bad. Cheer me up, and I want your videos cheer me up. Oh, dear God. Thank you, man. And I hope it does help. Also, fans in the chat, and this is his video I'm reacting to, so, dude, give him a shout out. Or, well, I guess go to the original video and leave a like. But yeah, that's awesome.
The Imperial fanatic breathed blood into her helmet, her free hand still locked onto the armor on his back,
dear God.
ripping free the white shell and mechanisms there as she collapsed and fell off the end of the sword. The clone could feel no pain and knew she had crushed the magnetic weapons locks on his armor and hopefully little else. But Sando had barely a second to judge the potential damage.
Use the weapon?
Another came for him, almost trampling the first, but Sando drove back the new mace-wielding assailant with wild swings of the dangerous weapon. This warrior seemed far more wary of the clone than the previous ones had been.
I mean, in her defense, she just watched a close combat specialist who was advanced enough to have a power sword, which none of the base level sisters do, get disarmed in melee combat and killed with her own weapon, while the guy had somehow thought throwing his weapon at the enemy was a good move and then making it work. And from what I've seen, Sando isn't one of the highly trained troopers. I don't know why I went that accent. It's as close to Australian as I get. So this is just what looks like a bog standard trooper from their side going Super Saiyan, essentially. It's like, oh shit, he had a new level of power. I mean, it's not actually Super Saiyan. That would be a Psyker at this point, but if they're not wary right now, I would actually be worried that this entire chapter, or I guess order of the sisters here, would be completely incompetent. So good for them.
And approached him with the steady cadence of a predator.
With
Sando
grenades,
was
most likely,
one
is the
of
best
only
option.
a handful of men left, and even the tanks behind them had been largely incapacitated by the exchange, having become the targets of the thundering Imperial weapons known as bolters.
Yep.
Still swinging the sword in a desperate warding gesture, Sando's eyes swiveled around in his skull, his brain cooking in desperate, furious calculation. The sisters drove in, and once more, he narrowly avoided death as he whipped out his blaster pistol and shot the ground beneath their feet, causing the rebel to melt and slide under the Imperial's boot, and buying him seconds more.
Seriously, that is actually a really interesting usage of a weapon, to melt the ground and to deny footwork to an enemy. I mean, if this was Seraphim, that wouldn't be a problem, but also, I don't think he's fighting Seraphim, so it doesn't matter.
He looked at the surviving clones around him and gestured to them with his blaster pistol. Fall back! Fall back! Fall back! He yelled to them. In response to his orders, another sound answered, the warbling roar of LAAT engines. The gunships flew overhead, strafing missiles into the body of the enemy assault, while more precise blaster cannon bolts hammered the line where the Imperial forces met the dying borders of the Republic's defense. The results were rapid and violent, creating space between the warring lines in the blink of an eye. But it was only the beginning. Already, Sando could feel the thump, thump, thump of advancing ATTEs, and soon, modified ISP speeders came into view, towing sleds full of fresh troopers ready to dismount in moments.
They have speeders literally acting as pack mules to drag forward a cart. Sorry. The irony here for me is that they're literally going to horse-drawn buggy as the equivalent of what they're talking, a hyper-technological form of it. I mean, it works, but that's the kind of ridiculousness I expect out of the Imperium on a feudal world.
Moments.
Oh,
the
man.
main column had finally arrived,
Oh, this is
and
the main column.
primary engagement of this battlefield had at long last commenced. But the Imperials were less than willing to allow the Republic a moment to rally, and Sando found himself stumbling back as columns of fire and smoke arched up from the savage horde of the Imperium. At first, he thought them to be some kind of weapon, rockets or mortars that the enemy had lobbed towards them. Soon, he saw that it was far worse, for these were no mere munitions, but sword and flame-bearing warriors, sisters of the
Seraphim.
screaming faith of the Empire, descending like angels of death born on hellish black and red wings.
Yup. Sorry. Oh, Josh Tompkins, you mean pod racings are a thing, or pod races are a thing? Yeah. And I stand by my comment because, admittedly, pod racing is the stupidest thing ever, and I love every second about it. Which is weird because I didn't when I first watched that show, or the movie. Yeah, I know, that's weird. That's probably the best part about it, and I did not like it. I like it now, just didn't then. Also, part of the reason I'm so excited to hear about Seraphim is because, as much as I think they're such a cool unit, I hate their models with a passion because of the flight stand. So I've never been able to use them. I got a bunch and I was like, wow, I don't care if they're good. I'm not going to bring them. It's like bringing St. Celestine somewhere. You just don't, because it will break. So it's nice seeing them used somewhere where that won't happen. I really wish I could transport things without breaking them, but that never happens.
They slammed down into the Republic line, crushing clones beneath their feet and wasting no time at all before they resumed their slaughter. One came for Sando, and he scrambled back, not in any position to defend himself adequately. The clone hefted his stolen sword and aimed it up towards the woman.
Oh good, he is
but
keeping
the gesture did not even slow her as she came for him, face bare and held in a rictus of frenzy as she did. He was moments from using his final breath to order another retreat, but the order was belayed before he could voice it.
Oh?
A flash of movement, unnatural and smooth as the blue clouds of Sumban 9. Sando shielded his eyes from the following sparks, sky-shaded and bright and utterly blinding. Despite this, his heart swelled in sudden faith. Faith in his own survival, faith in victory, for the storm had finally parted, and his general had come.
Oh, it's a Jedi.
Positions! Ayla ordered as she intercepted the winged warrior woman.
I mean, I knew Ayla was going to be in this because I literally used her as part of the thumbnail. Also, I thought it was much later in the show. I just, for some reason, thought she would be much more heavily wounded at this point after running into a certain definitely not Chaos Sorcerer. Completely not. As opposed to the explicit Chaos Sorcerer who is very confused at the moment.
Twi'lek Jedi danced and spun, gravity's pull on her body little more than an annoyance to the lithe master. The Imperial, suddenly confronted by such a foe, began skating and scraping out a dance of her own.
Yeah, because this ain't a Palatine,
belching
though.
and sputtering on her back as she used them to aid her mobility. They exchanged vicious blows, only stopping when the Jedi issued forth a pillar of invisible force into the sister, driving her back several feet. It was clear that the crazed cultist intended...
Okay, for a second. Because it immediately went black, I thought my screen had died for a second. God damn you, fan. It just... Nope. Normally he pauses it differently when he switches over. Does not a full black screen between them. So that actually freaked me out. God damn you. It's like, oh shit, what broke? Oh no, it's still going. And fan just said in the comment, Bacta is a hell of a drug. Yeah, it really is.
...to dive right back into the fray. But she was brought up short, Ayla standing tall in brazen challenge as all around the Jedi Master, stacked in ranks upon the slope, were hundreds, if not thousands of aimed blaster barrels, all pointing directly at the Imperial and her scant remaining sisters. Sando was standing over his general's right shoulder, sword held tightly in his right hand.
God, he's
blaster
actually doing the
pistol
backup.
clutched firmly in his left and aimed directly for the face of the Sister of Battle before them. Around her,
Damn.
the other sisters were being driven back to better cover, the fanatics being chased away. Their withdrawal becoming little more than a hastened retreat as they were pursued by trails of overlapping blaster fire and molten, dripping ceramite. The winged warrior scowled, the expression becoming a feral branding upon what may have been beautiful features. As Ayla raised her free hand, "Soldiers of the Grand Army of the Republic," said the Jedi Master, "advance!" The troopers opened fire, and the Imperial barely managed to activate her rockets quickly enough to launch herself back towards her own forces. On an arcing bow of smoke, crumbling armor, and bright blue blaster bolts. The final battle for Axum's reconquest would begin here, and it would begin now.
Really? Here? Because it's the main battle force for the Star Wars side, that's why. We've been talking so much about the main battle forces for the Imperium side, I actually forgot they had an army on the Star Wars side as well. Which is weird, now I think about it. We've seen the skirmishes, we've seen them being used and set up and defending points. Huh. It just, now that I think about it, we didn't really ever have a moment where we saw the landing of the army. We just saw the initial jump pack assault by the clones. I mean, it's not really a big deal, and it doesn't really need to be done because we saw the other side of it from the Imperium side. Just fans usually been covering both things evenly to a pretty high extent, so it's just kind of weird in hindsight that that's just something we've accepted as happened. Although the last thing I want to do is give fan ideas that he needs to go back and write more detail to show further aspects of the battle, because it's only been how many months of writing did this take him? I don't know. It's probably over a year of content already, for all I know. This came out a year ago, so probably more than. Dear God. I am very much jealous of his ability to write down scenes like this. Granted, I'm also an incredibly slow writer myself, so being able to write anything in a fast amount of time is kind of impressive to me. And they move on to Lazarus, though. Is that justified a little to the left? Almost feels like there's
Lazarus
something else.
sat amidst the beds and hanging white linens of the medical triage tents. He was not in one. That privilege
Space Marine
was reserved for the
equivalent.
survivors of his mission, who lay and sat around him, groaning and gasping as they bore their many agonies.
He's not
He had
dead,
been
though.
in this setting before, but never like this.
Hospitaler, that's
Most of the wounded were silent, some lost in prayer even as the Sisters Hospitaler moved between them, treating them with various drugs, medicines, and hooking them into life-saving machinery where it was required. But, in whatever state the wounded were in, the vast majority of them, or rather the ones with at least one eye remaining to them, if not both, kept those eyes firmly locked onto him. They acted as though he were the Emperor's own messenger.
Well, one of them did have a few words for you, so they're probably right.
Sent from his side with vital portents. Their expressions were hopeful, desperate, reverent,
That must
and
feel really
filled with a
weird to him.
religious infatuation that he had never once imagined falling on him. He was a soldier, a guardsman,
Saint
the Emperor's
Lazarus.
hammer, not his word-bearer. Yet, in his
There is no way. Fan did not choose that exact phrase intentionally. I am not his word bearer. Well, I'd hope so, because if you were, you probably would have done something incredibly stupid by now. Yeah, it's like saying someone is a eater of worlds and that we need to charge and there's a ton of blood everywhere. If you say all of that together, you know I'm definitely referencing the Death Guard. Still, though. Oh, and apparently fan said, on average, I'm not sure, but it's at least double what it takes to view. Probably more. Okay, he's probably responding to the previous people talking about that. The time spent writing it. Oh, so it's a few days and he's talking about the average, so it's double that it takes to view it. Huh. Still, there's a lot going on. Heading out, Hobbit? All right, thanks for dropping in, man. And you're... Ooh. Glad to see fans well on his end. Yeah, I hope he's doing a lot better. Oh, and Omni Comic, you're a slow writer yourself. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. That said, it's really fun watching this. So I'm glad you're here.
His hands, limply clamped between cold, numb fingers, was a certificate meant for his next of kin.
Certificate?
His own death certificate.
What?
Columbia had been abandoned. Most of its population...
Wait, did I miss something? Why does he have his own? They brought him back. They washed it. He wasn't dead long enough for that to be a thing.
For his limply clamped between cold and error. Yet, in his hands, limply clamped between cold, numb fingers, was a certificate meant for his next of kin. His own death certificate.
They gave him one.
Columbia had been abandoned, most of its population coming with the Zectec fleet, while the remainder purposefully activated their planet's maligned lockdown in the hopes that the presence of the dead, frozen sphere would attract no unwanted Tyranid attention.
What?
However, even had the whole world packed up and left, Lazarus was the last of his line, the last of his name. But instead of being printed and burned, as would have been standard, the certificate was instead given to him, the waxy paper held limply in his hands as his eyes blankly scanned the faces around him. He'd been shot, almost point blank, with a bolt pistol.
And it hit.
He died. And then, at the touch of the holy canoness, he had been restored to life, and since that moment, he had not spoken even a single word.
Oh?
The truth was, he had no words to say. He had returned feeling utterly empty, as though his soul was only slowly trickling back into his body.
Considering how souls work here, that is probably literally how that went. He's not probably describing this inaccurately. That is one of the most likely options, being completely accurate, that what the canonist did wasn't just drag the soul back down and put it there, but give it away to come back after using the magic, well, might not be psyker power, but something Emperor related to restore his body. I mean, it's actually, it's one of the miracles and in-game utilities that can happen on the canonist side, the Sister of Battle side, as an actual ability to just respawn a unit. Well, a model, but details. Also, fan said, those death certificates already exist. They gave him his because he is not officially part of the Astra Militarum at this point. If he were, Shadra could execute him, or again. Oh, so literally in death, duty ended. But he got better, so technically he's unemployed. Huh. I wonder if there's a classified ad in the Imperium. Unemployed saints seeking job opportunity. I don't think that's how Imperium ads work. Hell, I'm not sure that's how ads work in general. Shows how much I know about newspaper ads. But yeah, all Imperial Guard death certificates are printed the moment you join the Guard and are held until they are needed. Yeah, that's morbid, but also it makes a lot of sense because with their bureaucracy, it probably wouldn't actually ever get out otherwise.
His mind still in shock. He had died in seconds of the blast, his heart halting from the shock of it and leaving him to experience only moments of his own death.
Damn.
That had proven painful, and painful far beyond his expectations of what dying of shock would have been like.
Oh.
But at least that had lasted only moments. Coming back, however, had been a whole different kind of hurt.
Did he get to see
the agony that had been poured over him, mind, body, and soul, as he was wrenched from Doom's rigid grasp and forced back into his body had been exquisitely unique. And the pain of it had devoured his every thought throughout. He did not doubt that many who watched him assumed that he was struck speechless by the majesty of the Emperor and his brief but potent time within the afterlife. The reality was that the trauma of coming back to life had stolen his language from him, and even as it came back into his mind, the former guardsman had no idea what to say or even what to think.
This is actually something I really hope Fan goes into more detail on, because this is the first person we've seen talk about having died on this side. Now, I mean, for the Star Wars side, they probably just go on to the Force and dissipate and whatever. I don't actually know. But there's a very distinct order of operations with how things happen on the Imperium side. When you're in 40K, Your soul either gets picked up by the Emperor or you get nommed on by demons. There's really no other options left at that point other than that, unless you have like some specific niches or you're chaotic. But any other option, that would be a very interesting take. Now, whether he would realize that's different or not, I don't know. But the fact that he's just talking about damage, the pain of it, is that what he's going to see? Or is there more information he's going to see and maybe it's something completely different? I don't know. And frankly, I don't know how this would work otherwise. Because I don't know what the Star Wars side afterlife really is like other than Force ghosts.
In a single day, he'd gone from wearing the flak and fatigues of a sergeant to the carapace and uniform of a major, and now to what he was wrapped in. Stripped out of his former attire by the sister who had washed and tended his remaining wounds after his resurrection, he now wore bright white robes composed of bleached sackcloth, utterly unmarked and unmarred by any other addition, save for the rough hemp belt which was tied around his waist.
They literally dressed him like Jesus. If that's not an illusion, I am going to laugh my eyes off. That's not a... Why did I... Oh. Cry my eyes out, laugh my ass off. I metaphor sometimes, and then there's today, where it just doesn't happen.
The garment was itchy and rough, but also light and clean. He was here to be watched for complications, but the sisters around him worked with utter faith that he had been saved, and were among the least likely to be caught staring at Lazarus, occupied by their own work. He'd avoided speaking to any of them, to anyone at all.
His first
he knew they would ask him about what had happened and what he had seen and felt.
Yeah.
Lazarus needed to be strong. He needed to stand so that the soldiers around him, now looking to him more than ever, could stand as well. He needed to give faith and strength to the warriors around him, even if he had little left for himself. But he knew that if he spoke, if he was asked to recall his experience, that he would be unable to remain unbent. He knew that he would falter and fall. And for a man who was chosen as a leader in war, this was simply not an option. He shifted his mind, instead choosing to focus on how grateful he was towards the Canoness.
Yeah.
Not for saving his life, though he did appreciate that as well.
For what then?
Or rather, he knew he would eventually. No, he was grateful for her forceful assignment of him and his men to this duty, guarding the...
Because if she didn't take over, like fans said in the comments, what's his name, who I've made a point to definitely not remember, unlike usually where I just don't remember anything, would have assigned them and killed him off legally because he could still do that as the boss. Yeah.
The medical camp which had been set up just behind the battle lines. Naturally, this meant that his soldiers had first access to its services, something they sorely needed. And though his least injured and most alert men were put to the first guard, all of his beleaguered soldiers found themselves with something hot to drink and warm to eat, if they could stomach it, which he knew they would. They were excellent soldiers, after all. Then Lazarus became aware of something, a tremble, an approach.
Canoness?
He felt it through the floor and in the air, and then soon in the form of a commotion outside the
Probably
tent.
the Canoness.
At first, he had thought that the enemy were firing a new weapon, but soon realized it was coming from the wrong direction for that to be the case. The sound was too regular and growing louder too rapidly to be a weapon. A great mechanical roar shook the air, drawing unheard screams and cries from the soldiers around him. The earth trembled and then quaked as a vast, vaguely humanoid shadow swept across and over the tents.
Oh, is this Nerva? Oh, wait, Nerva is meeting up with Lazarus first? Was not expecting that one.
Medical implements falling to the ground as something huge leapt over them. Then it was past and drawing further and further away. Oh, what in the feck was that?
I didn't know knights could jump.
Yelled a large Cadian who was strapped down to a medical bed and being attended by 3 hospitaller at once. The statement was soon echoed in thoughts and voices by nearly all inside the tent, though Lazarus would sit tranquil throughout. Victory, Lazarus said, drawing all eyes once he spoke.
Oh, goddamn. They've been playing up. Fan made the choice to say he hasn't spoken yet, and he knows he has to be strong when he says it. So the one time he speaks, the first time, they give him the best choice. And as far as setting up a scene goes, this could be the entire scene right now, and it would give exactly what we need, because we know this is Nerva in the night, that she's made it through. She's now attacking. How much good shape she's in right now, I'm hoping is pretty good considering how the night built her up at the end. But now we know that she's going to be in the next scene, most likely, unless Fan decides to give us a cliffhanger on top of this. You know, I was going to say that as a joke, but no, Fan would do that.
It is victory, he said again, for Lazarus knew that sound, though only from simulations. Murmurs and questions filled the time after his voice, but Lazarus did not speak again, and luckily for him, he did not need to. Minutes later, the tent flaps flew open, and a scrawny Vestillan recruit clambered in, trembling from head to toe as he carried an unconscious, wounded woman.
Oh.
He barely made it 3 steps before just as many sisters met him, 2 taking the woman from him wordlessly and laying her down on a nearby bed, while the 3rd took him gently but firmly by the arm and led him to another place to rest. "Hey, Vasti!" a wounded Cadian corporal called from nearby. The man jerked his head nervously in her direction. Yes?" he asked. "You, feck, burning throne, sister, that hurts!" She groaned as the hospitaller at her bedside inserted a long needle into her. "It'll hurt worse if you keep using that kind of language in here, Cadian. I'm almost certain you'll live, so appreciate this pain." The woman grimaced at the sister's pronouncement and redirected her attention to the new arrival.
Pain, yeah.
"Did you get a good look at whatever it was that jumped over the camp?"
Probably,
she asked. He nodded nervously. "Well, spit it out
from the
then."
inside, even.
She coaxed
if it's who I think it is.
A couple of seconds went by. "Oh, that's the knight," the man muttered. "The what? A knight? An Imperial knight? I thought we lost all our local heavy support when they hammered into the auxiliary base."
Not all of it.
The woman blurted out. Murmurs and excited chatter began to spread at those words. Everyone present who knew what an Imperial Knight was knew exactly what it could do for this fight.
Yeah.
Lazarus himself had guessed as much from the sound of the thing, and felt a greater elation sink into him at the confirmation. "Yeah, the base fell. Our squad managed to find the pilot, though. Most of us died getting her down there, but we did it. Lost the sergeant, lost everyone but the rookie and the corporal, but we..." The muttering man was cut off then, as a cheer rose from the beleaguered soldiers around him.
Sorry about that. I swallowed my own tongue as soon as I wanted to talk. But yeah, I know. He just told a Cadian, most of us died to get the victory. But he told this to Cadians, where it's like, most of us died, but we got victory, is literally the equivalent of saying, haha, fuck yeah. That is a boast right there. It probably comes with their planet being reduced to pocket sand.
His eyes widened and he flinched back as though the mass of voiced gratitude might strike him physically. "That makes you lot a bunch of throne-damned heroes," the Cadian declared, barely making her voice heard through the cacophony. The man looked around, his eyes still wide as he pressed his palms to his ears. Lazarus raised his hands, and in a few moments enough had seen to quiet the room. "We'd been hoping for a Baneblade, or any other super heavy support. A knight is a blessing from the Emperor himself. Take pride, guardsmen. And
considering they have actually, in practical terms, what is the difference between a regular knight pilot piloting a knight and someone capable of piloting a Titan piloting a knight? I'm wondering if that's the reason fans said that the knight jumped, because a normal guy would not be able to, or I guess a normal pilot wouldn't be able to do that, but because Titan pilot, fuck yeah, I can do it, is actually a possibility. Or do knights just normally jump, and I have no idea about that. Honestly, they're not mutually exclusive either. Also, fan is saying it's not Farnus, it's the guardsmen. They left many of the... Oh! I completely forgot about that guy. Admittedly, I thought he was just dead off screen the second they left him behind. Oh, neat. So Farnus is still with them. Okay, good to know then.
You and your squad, alive or dead, have very likely saved this entire operation.
Yep.
The scrawny man blushed, his pale face reddening even more as the words were followed by the eyes
because he
and
would have been
attention
the
of
one just
everyone
standing
who turned
back
to
while
see
everyone
him.
else died.
Honestly, I just operated the elevator. The real blessing was the lack of artillery fire.
Underground.
From how hard our base had been hammered at the start, I had been worried that we'd never make it more than 5 steps from the Mechanicus Temple before those distant cannons turned us to dust.
And now we're bringing in Lazarus' side because of his assault saving it. Okay, this is something so many stories don't do right. When they have so many branching paths that go which way and every way, and especially since Fan early on mentioned that Lazarus was kind of a spur of the moment, 1313 was a spur of the moment. They weren't supposed to be main characters. They were just characters to show a side, but then they became central to the plot. And now he's tying it in. Because the reason this existed, because they could get the knight without the artillery shelling them, and we saw the artillery emplacement being taken down by Lazarus' troop. So we're having all of that pulled together and how they were interacting, how they were connected, and that's really cool. Some places try this, some stories try. More don't. And it pisses me off. Where they're like, see all these crazy things happening all over the place? Great, what do they mean? Nothing. As an English major who just sees people throw random events out there because this looks cool, that is lazy writing, because someone wants to write a story, but they don't know how to construct a story to make sense. A lot of that is based on the idea as, well, random things happen in real life, so I can just throw things out there and they make sense. No! Again, this is going into the weeds on writing philosophy, but real life, anything normal life, is insane, does not have to have meaning. It can be ridiculous or crazy or out of the blue and insane. I keep saying insane because it is that, insane. It does not require sanity. Fiction, especially when suspension of disbelief is involved, like a crossover between 40K and Star Wars in the far off future and also long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away. When we're talking about disparate factions fighting each other on a planet that doesn't exist with super sci-fi weapons and religious zealotry, that suspension of disbelief is already stretched so far. So having everything start to work together gives you that bridge to say, oh, this makes sense. And that's why this is important, because that is a very contextual part that makes a story better, because it gives you meaning. And that's what the story needs to do to achieve suspension of disbelief and just to be well written in general, because those who don't are bad. If you can think of any stories on the top of your head that has a, well, this happened. Moving on. Big lipped alligator moments, man. When done for humor, fine. But so many times they're done because the author has no idea what the fuck they're doing. Basically what I'm saying is, to summarize all this, Fan is a good writer and he did a good thing.
Don't know what they decided to fire on instead of us, but I bet they chose wrong, the blushing soldier said sheepishly. The room around him silenced for a moment, all eyes staring a little more intensely at the man.
Because he just told the Cadians who saved him, or who is in the room with Lazarus, who's directly responsible for not dying. Oh, they are building up Lazarus. Going straight to them. I thought they were all split up.
Something's going on. Crosshair hissed from where he hid.
I really need to catch up on all the Star Wars
Yeah,
Clone
you
Wars
think?
stuff.
Wrecker chortled not far away, hiding behind a large statue of some kind of machine man. This one evidently venerated instead of being a slave. Quiet, both of you.
What?
Hunter snapped.
I forgot where we're at with them.
They were all hiding, waiting. They had been traversing the bizarre temple, pausing to deactivate sensors and sneak around personnel, when suddenly and without apparent trigger, an alarm began to blare. The resonance of it made clear to the clones that it wasn't just blaring here, but all across the temple, maybe even across the whole ship.
So this is most likely on the Imperial ship because it has the temple. So that means the alarm is probably containment breach in the prison block. Yeah, that would do it.
Naturally, they had taken cover and hidden, and not a moment too soon. As a veritable battalion of droid men, all rapidly marching in perfect synchronicity, entered the chamber they had been within.
Do they know they're there, though?
But no sooner had they entered than they crossed and exited once more.
They don't.
The phenomenon repeated itself again three more times before a general stillness settled upon the room once more. The alarm still blared, but in the absence of any more traffic, Hunter waved his men forward, and it was not long before they found the access terminal within the room. Tech began to interface it with his datapad, and the others gathered around, keeping watch. "Fingers crossed," Crosshair said, and Hunter could only nod, kneeling with his rifle out as he waited. Time passed, but in the end, all the machine produced was a dissatisfied groan, voiced by Tech. "Again?" Wrecker asked, exasperated. "Are we even in the right place?" he added. "He's got a point, Tech. You sure we're looking in the right place?" Hunter asked. Tech crossed his arms and rubbed his chin. "Yes, there's no doubt about it. Even if the control systems were not here, the access terminals in this place are comprehensive and widely tethered throughout the ship." "In basic?" Crosshair asked. "It means that, even if it weren't here, the terminals would tell us where it is anyway," Tech said.
Huh.
"Except they're not," Hunter added silently, and Tech nodded, frustration writ clear on his face. "Look alive," Crosshair said. "Single target, just came in through a maintenance hatch," he added a moment later, eyes fixed on his raised scope.
You know, so I'm reading over here, and they're saying they're on the same ship as Ahsoka. But I thought that ship are... Because this is probably early on before the ship started going down. Okay, that would be why I was confused. Initially, I thought they had to have maybe moved over to the other ship somehow, and I just missed something. Which, I mean, it's me. Missing something completely is moderately likely. But it makes a lot more sense if this is prior to the ship going down. So we're seeing something leading up to that. Okay.
Clone Force 99 took cover once more, hiding in the shadow of the pillars as the figure made his way closer and closer, going for the very same access panel they had been using only moments ago. The red-robed figure skulked, looking around suspiciously as though he were the one being hunted, though Hunter gathered that it was more likely he was using the alarm as a distraction to do something.
Oh, so this is probably not... Yeah, probably not the one that was with the psychic... I was going to say psychic prick, but that wouldn't be fair to the other psychic pricks. It's probably not with the Chaos Sorcerer, who's unaware of it. I know his name. I refuse to use it. But that means this is probably the one that Ahsoka had the heart-to-heart with. But what would they be doing in the temple?
Not so sanctioned of his own. And that gave him an idea. He crept down and drew his vibroblade, inching in from the man's blind spot.
Unless this is someone different.
"What are you doing?" Crosshair hissed as he passed.
Something stupid.
"Trying a different source," Hunter whispered back. "Cover me," he ordered. His brothers did so, and soon Hunter was nearly directly behind the man. He was tapping and typing away frantically on the terminal's key interface, avoiding a direct link for some reason, despite the many mechanical tendrils he had about his covered body.
Who's he trying to hide from?
Suddenly, the man paused and tensed, spinning around only to find the point of Hunter's knife in his face. and 3 other clones aiming weapons at him from over his shoulders.
That's
the hooded
shock.
figure slowly raised its arms in surrender.
This isn't what it seems like?
Huh? Also, one fan is in the chat going, "What have you all done?" I am confused. I don't think I want to ask any questions because that might be weird. 2, this is a very weird thing for the tech priest to say, but only because 2 reasons. 1, his initial response is to cover up for himself. 2, he's seeing a bunch of the enemy that they've all been fighting, and he's more concerned about hiding what he's doing than the fact that they're not the same faction who even know what he's doing. So this is, unless he's actively avoiding tapping in and doesn't know what's going on. That would be really specific, and I'd actually not guess that until later.
The man asked, oddly nonchalant about his words, which he voiced more like a question, clearly a terrible liar. His words were spoken in one of the new Imperial languages, but Hunter's armor-mounted translator made short work of it and translated his own word.
And people are in the chat saying it's the fake tech priest. You know what? I actually completely forgot about him. He hasn't been on the screen in a while. Honestly, I thought he was just a bit character. Apparently, he's sticking around. It's the Call wannabe, as opposed to actual Call, who also wants to be Call sometimes because he did split himself off into a separate personality one time.
Words back when he responded. And what does it not look like? He asked. The machine man seemed to cringe and shrug.
I certainly was not fleeing confinement, and I also was not seeking a way to escape this subpar laboratory.
The red-robed man said, a deserter's hesitance tainting his voice. Not that Hunter knew to recognize it. The sergeant shrugged. I don't care. We have questions we need answered.
And this guy probably doesn't even know anything.
A bomb was placed
yet,
on the 4th planet in this system, a planet cracker. We need access to its control systems, and I'm afraid I can't take no for an answer. The clone commando said, bringing his blade closer. The red-robed man paused, tilting his head curiously, though he kept his hands up.
You're not lab security, are you?
He just figured that out now.
You're Republic Replicate. Infiltrators. Oh, then I take back everything I just said. I am definitely trying to escape this place, and I am certainly fleeing this disastrously
Oh my god. Fan, you have done a great job writing someone who is so oblivious that he has to explain to the people who are capturing him, oh, wait, I am not actually doing the thing I was obviously lying about because I'm such a good liar. He's so oblivious that he actually felt the need to say, oh, I see who you really are now that I've had my great scheme go. Oh my god. I love characters like this. I like it when they're so over the top oblivious that they can be funny by accident. And this guy is, I didn't get a strong impression of him the first time, but already I'm loving him. Oh my god. He's the kind of guy who would go up to someone who's just been shot and ask, it looks like you might be in a bit of pain. Might I help? And then proceeds to do something that does not help. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It could be semi-helpful, it could be a lot helpful, it could be not helpful at all, but it's not going to feel like help, and it's going to be hilarious. Or, played straight, horrifying. It's 40K, so that fits in. Oh.
Sufficient excuse for a laboratory.
This time, the clone found himself blinking in brief confusion.
Yeah.
I told you, I don't care. Will you take us to the control system for the bomb or not? He asked.
He doesn't know there's a bomb.
Oh, but you should care.
The man said brightly.
I'll gladly take you. I know exactly where it is, in fact.
I'm sure he does.
Your goal is on the way to where I myself am going.
Right.
But in exchange, you must promise to help me make my appointment so that I can escape this place. if I am forced to produce even one more design for that ungrateful and uninspired disgrace upon the title of Magos, I'll seriously reconsider self-termination. Though, it would go against the lore to do such a thing.
What's he saying? Wrecker asked.
Oh my god.
He's offering to show us where the bomb controls are in exchange for a ride out of here, I think, Tech explained. Hunter paused, looking at the man and considering his offer. The alarm was still blaring, and if the cause of it was not them or this man, then it was most likely General Skywalker. He was a mighty Jedi, no doubt about it, but even he could not...
Wait, so they are on the Imperial ship? I thought they were on the CIS ship that was crashing because Tech was with Ahsoka earlier. Unless they split up at some point, in which case I'm just forgetting that because it's been a while. So they are on the ship, and it probably was Anakin that they were hearing escape with the alarms. Okay. But
take on the entire ship. They were running out of time, and a gun...
I'm just going crazy. Or did they move the bomb from the CIS ship into the Imperial ship? My memory's all mixed up, apparently.
More sensible than a mindless trash droid would be more than useful, maybe even invaluable. All right, fine. You lead us to the controls and help us get out of here, and we'll take you the rest of the way, he said, spinning his blade back and sliding it into his sheath.
Agreed,
the robed man said. The other clones looked at Hunter hesitantly, but lowered their weapons at a nod from him as he led the red-robed man back to them. This is a mistake, Crosshair muttered as he passed. Maybe, Hunter whispered back.
And Fan just said I was making the... Oh, this is Echo, who's with Ahsoka, not Tech. Ah, that's why I was thrown off, but the image he used had, I think, Echo in there, so... Yeah, that's what threw me off. It was the image that had him, but he wasn't actually there. Oh, I see. That's what got it. And they moved the bomb to study, according to Charmin. Or Charmin. Ah. Yep. Okay, I got it now. I see where I was confused. Thanks for everyone showing me the exact opposite thing I was believing that was apparently correct. Yeah, I should probably just get like a button where it plays. Thank you for correcting me about being stupid, because at this point, I'm going to say it often enough.
So keep your trigger ready, he added. Crosshair nodded subtly and backed away, going to stand by Wrecker as the strange man came amongst them. Hunter turned to face him again and pointed with his thumb towards his own chest. Name's Hunter, by the way. Behind me is Tech, tall one is Crosshair, and the big one over there is Wrecker, he said, extending a hand towards the Imperial. The man stared at it in what seemed open delight for a couple of moments before taking it and shaking it, emulating Hunter's grip and posture perfectly.
Why would he be happy about that?
A pleasure to meet you, Hunter, Tech, Crosshair, and Wrecker. I am designated as Quo. Magos Quo 84, at your service.
Just gotta throw the Magos in there. Oh, we're back to Weiler. Oh no, what's he up to now?
Tarweiler leaned against a broken, bent wall of metal. Once part of a building that had been reduced to nearly nothing by the searing touch of energy weapons. His black eyes shimmered in the deep shadow that was cut by the jagged arch of alien steel, shielding him from the light and rain as he stood sentinel over the carnage around him. The clones fought like men possessed, and the Inquisitor knew that the sentiment was more than a metaphor, having egressed from theatrics into the realm of distinct possibilities.
Yep, and he's aware of it then.
But, be that
Inquisitor,
as it may, they were being beaten back by Commissar Tyrandor and his accompanying forces.
Damn.
The near melee had been at a standstill for several minutes, but as mauled as the Commissar's numbers had been, these clones had clearly already been party to vicious fighting.
So they're tired.
And their coordination and discipline had begun to evaporate as fury conquered duty, and exhaustion threatened imminence upon their entire army. The Imperium's forces were, by comparison, relatively fresh and ready for combat. And apparently, this was all thanks to the acts of some new saint or hero who had revealed himself and martyred himself to save them from the dishonorable tactics of the Jedi.
Wait. That is actually kind of fascinating. I'm going to hear that again, just make sure I didn't mishear that.
Martyred himself to save them. Saint or hero who had revealed himself and martyred himself to save them from the dishonorable tactics of the Jedi.
Oh. Now that is interesting. Because we're hearing this from Wyler's perspective right now, what he's talking about is what he would believe is the truth. So he believes Lazarus, who he doesn't know the name of, martyred himself. Nothing about getting better yet. One, at no point did he martyr himself. He got into situations where that was about to happen. So he's either acting on the knowledge of when he fell and everyone believes he's dead from that, or when he was shot and that's considered the martyrdom against bullshit. But it sounds more like the falling is what he's perceiving here. So he's working on incorrect information. And considering his type of character is a schemer who plans out what he does until it immediately backfires because he's kind of a dumbass. In D&D terms, he has a 20, maybe even plus 20 in terms of intelligence and a 3 in wisdom. Yeah.
This and more he had learned from...
Oh, he's talking about a different one? Oh, he's talking about Gaxian. Oh, okay. Different saint. Sorry. When I heard martyred, I thought it was... And Fan is now saying, I fear what I saw, for in terror and awe I beheld his law descending. I do not know what the quote is. Oh, and they're talking about Saint Gaxian, not Saint Lazarus. Because it was a different time with different troops that... I don't think Lazarus actually engaged Jedi. Okay, that makes more sense. So they're talking about Gaxian instead. Huh. Ah, damn. I thought he was getting incorrect information about Lazarus because he mentioned a saint. I actually forgot about Gaxian, my apologies.
From a medic who had tended to his injuries. A man referred to as Panic by the others around him.
Panic?
Despite the worrying moniker, the man had seemed remarkably calm and steady-handed, something even experienced medics often had trouble achieving when working on Tar's less personable visage.
Odd choice, considering he's actually in the story.
His mind could scarcely dwell on appreciating the man's nerve, however, before the guardsmen managed to retrieve Tar Wyler's rogue traitor. As was to be expected, the rogue traitor's nerve, however, before the guardsmen managed to retrieve Tar Wyler's rogue traitor.
When did Wyler have a rogue traitor? I thought he had a tech priest and a daemon. Sorry. I mean, someone who's possessed by a daemon who's definitely not treating anything. So is Rogue Trader a name he's using, or does he actually just have another person with him as retinue?
As was to be expected, the fool had come to them himself, insisting on being a part of the adventure whenever possible. So,
yeah,
he
Rogue Trader,
had been in the
sense.
front row when his gun cutter had been blasted out of the sky. His heavy...
Oh, he was the one in the airship that was shot down. Okay, that makes sense. They were waiting on him.
His body was dragged out of the wreckage and towards the medics at an urgent pace, and it was easy to see why. Burnt from scalp to toenails, partially fused into his stylish and now half-molten flight suit. The man was a screaming, convulsing mess, and one
he's not
would be
dead?
lucky to survive. Tar watched it all.
Lucky. You know, from Wyler's perspective, that might count. From anyone else's, they're probably considering the Emperor's mercy at this point, and honestly, no, they're right about that one.
Fall from his place under the bent wall, left alone as Panic rushed to aid the more grievously wounded of the two.
Yeah.
The Inquisitor feeling the cold of the rain he was drenched in for the first time.
Oh?
And shivering to the sound of blaster fire and death. He briefly considered rejoining the fight and lending his strength to the soldiers who had rescued him, but dismissed the thought.
Honestly, I'm actually more surprised that he would think of it. Dismissing it? No, makes perfect sense. But I'm actually a little surprised that it would even cross his mind to help people because they helped him. He always came across, at least in my interpretation, which could be completely off base because I'm not a fan, obviously, that Wyler is very much, I think the phrase is, up his own ass with his beliefs and diluted out the ass again, which he is up. He thinks he is, well, let's just say a million different things I've said about him already. Not a Chaos Sorcerer, not a traitor, not an exact reasoning why there should be a entire division of Ordo Hereticus just looking at other Inquisitors because, yeah. There's probably, you know what, actually in hindsight, there probably is an Inquisition branch that does just look at Inquisition branches. I probably even heard of it at some point too. It would make perfect sense. Especially considering, I think Abaddon does have that one seer who did help found the Inquisition. Not sure if that was canon or not, or just something I read.
Omni, Kraden, and Jakal were still waiting within the outpost, which Tar had only barely managed to keep the guardsmen out of.
Yeah, they would not like seeing
His
that.
mind was smoking with frustration, his plan turning and adjusting into the circumstances. He'd need to contact his man at the Basilica of Salvation, Major Flecken. Tar doubted he would be able to covertly reach and disable the spaceport from his current situation, which meant the plan needed to accelerate. The very thought was fury itself. His plan had been so well executed until...
well executed. Where is the ship coming down? Because I was about to say, so he's looking to destroy the spaceport because the Imperium needs a loss to galvanize them to fight harder against an enemy that's actually able to stand up to them. I'm really hoping the ship comes down on the spaceport to give Tar Wyler that feeling of, my plan is back on. Also, oh shit, maybe we actually do need to fight. As opposed to, I need to make them believe we need to fight for unity, to, oh, I succeeded way too hard. Sorry, one of my favorite things when it comes to scheming characters like this, both Palpatine and Wyler, is whenever their schemes turn on them and they have to face that they done fucked up. Doesn't usually happen in Palpatine. He just dies and then it's off screen. It's like, oh, that's a little satisfying. But maybe with Wyler we'll get that. Or who knows, maybe we'll get that with Palpatine this time around. Not sure how that'll work or if Fen would indulge in that, but that's just my petty little interest when it comes to schemers.
Till now, like dominoes carrying themselves to the ground, with only a touch here and a touch there required. But now, the pattern was flawed, and a more direct approach would need to be taken. He had planned on relying on the escalating situation to force the hand of the sisters who controlled the Basilica. In this, Major Flecken was vital, both as another subtle push, and as the hand himself should the need arise. And it appeared that it had.
So Flecken's
that hand he had prepared needed to be signaled to squeeze the trigger. The trigger on a weapon that would end the world and everything on it.
The bomb.
But first, the timing had to be just right, and his exit needed to be secured. Already, Tar had predicted that the Republic's many naval forces would be arriving in the system shortly.
How?
If they had not entered from the beginning already.
I mean, I guess it makes sense that he would have access to what was taken from Tech, knowing that they have assets. But if the Empire... Sorry, I keep saying that. If the Republic wasn't even aware of the massive fleet Palpatine was pulling together, why would Wyler? Unless he means that as a general, we are making a big fight here, they're going to send assets type statement. Maybe that's what he meant, and not the actual specific numbers, just that it would make sense to come.
He needed to both ensure the weapon's activation and secure his own escape from the world before it fired. With his rogue traitor near death, his...
Wait, Josh Thompson said, fun fact, Flecken is the Major Lazarus replaced. So the entire plot, everything Wyler was doing, was invalidated a handful of episodes in, and he had no idea. So it literally was never possible. His entire plan would not work because the person he was relying on to be the switch is not even alive. And the person who replaced him has no idea about the deal. He is going to be sending messages to people who could only incriminate himself at worst. Oh. That is actually hilarious. Oh my god, this is awesome.
Very nearly exposed, and his hand almost revealed, the Inquisitor knew that the task before him would be a tricky one, but one which was far from impossible for the likes of him.
I just want him to meet Lazarus and find out what happened now.
His first step was to contact Major Flecken.
Yup!
He watched the medics toil over his friend for a time longer before slinking away and moving towards a communications officer. The man was relaying commands through the heavy Vox relay pack on his shoulders, kneeling behind the stationary form of a chimera.
Wait, I also just realized Lazarus is technically out of a job right now because he's with the sisters, because if he wasn't, then he would be re-executed by said commissar. So the commissar might be the one acting in the position Flecken took over, or he appointed one of his subordinates to the position. It really just comes down to, does Tarweiler have way too many people under his employ, or is he going to start bribing someone who's already a lowlife? Yeah, probably the second one, actually.
And turned away from the battle as he did his duty.
Oh my god.
Tar stood over him at just enough of an angle that the man would catch his sharp, toothed face in the side view of his vision. The Inquisitor was already smiling, even before the man snapped his eyes back towards him, as Tar had expected he would. The officer almost hesitated in the stream of information he was relaying, managing to impress the monstrous Imperial servant who leered over him. In spite of Wyler's obvious rank and disturbing appearance, the man did not halt until his task was completed. He then pivoted, still on one knee, and saluted. Inquisitor!
Okay, it's bothering me, so I need to ask, Van, why did you choose the image of what looks like a Talaran Imperial Guard unit, or specifically someone from there, with a ring light on the back of their pack? Like, is it dark or something? Do they want to make sure to get the best light when they film themselves? It's like, hey guys, welcome to the Imperial Net, where we show you the best shots we've taken at heretics. Admittedly, that actually would make a lot of sense and would do as probably more to help people than the uplifting Imperial Primer. On the other hand, I could see a lot of people doing stupid shit and it could be corrupted very easily. So probably about as much damage as the Imperial Primer.
The surprisingly stalwart guardsman said, How may I serve?
Can you reach the Basilica of Salvation with that setup?
Tar asked.
Alive?
The man did not respond right away, first placing a hand against the heavy ear.
He meant the pack he was using. Okay, that makes more sense. For a second, I don't know why. I thought he was like actually going there. I was like, why would he do that? And it's like, oh no, wait, he's talking. That's why. He's literally the guy doing the radio.
Earpiece and speaker he wore on his head, his other hand manipulating the various knobs and switches on his Vox relay. After a few...
Why is the chat talking about sending angry beavers? You know what? There's some things I'm better off not asking. I'm just going to move on.
Moments had passed, he gave a sharp nod. Yes, sir. Connection is viable.
Good. Get me in contact with Major Flecken right now.
The Inquisitor demanded. The man nodded in response and began to dial in his Vox codes. Despite the fluidity of his actions, the Inquisitor could not help but notice how long the task was taking, and how the man was forced to stop and verbally navigate with those of the Basilica.
Also, I'm being told that that's actually part of the infantry guard kit for the radio pack. Huh. I actually didn't know that. In the area I play in, the Imperial Guard players are all tanks. And I don't actually have any Imperial Guard beyond a few tanks. So no, I've literally never actually seen the pack. That said, it really does look like a ring light.
As he sought the Major, Tar felt the tightness in his gut long before the news arrived. "I'm sorry, Inquisitor," the man said at last, "but it appears Major Flecken is dead. He was assassinated by a Jedi witch earlier today." The news was like a slap in the face. How much had been slipping out of place while he had been absent? How...
Oh, no. You don't get to say that. This happened immediately into the fight. This was well before your bullshit plans. You were concocting them on the fly. This had happened well before. You just planned badly. This wasn't when you were out of place.
On Terra had Flecken gotten himself killed.
He had
By
been
being in the wrong place at the wrong
instructed to
time.
stall the deployment of Imperial forces from the Basilica. So dire, the Basilica's commanding authority would have no choice but to activate the temple's final failsafe.
And it looks like the chat just died. Let's see if it comes back for a second. Yeah, for everyone watching, this happens all the time. Don't you just love Comcast? Honestly, I want to finish this today, but I am not sure if we'll be able to. I'm going to go until the chat finally dies, or by chat, I mean the actual video. We'll see. I give it 50-50 odds. We've already had 2 spikes where it decided not to play the video. We shall see, Rabbit. We shall see. More importantly, though, he's mentioning we needed some kind of issue, some problem that's so big no one can ignore it. I mean, you'd have to drop a spaceship from orbit or something at that point. What are the chances of that happening?
But it all needed to happen so much faster now. Get me in touch with Imperial Command at the Basilica.
Dead.
Anyone with authority who is not a part of the Ministorum or Sororita.
The
Is
Inquisitor
there anyone?
began to say. He was cut off when the Vox officer suddenly rose up and, with both hands, shoved Weiler back. With enough force to throw the Inquisitor,
Whoa.
Tar was sent pitching across the broken street, caught totally.
I mean, I'm assuming there's a Jedi and the guy just saved his life, but can we just take a second to appreciate that an Imperial Guardsman was actually capable of shoving what is probably an Inquisitor in power armor? God damn, man.
Off guard as he fell hard onto the tarnished floor. He released a less than human growl from his altered throat and curled into a sitting position in time to see the next attack coming. The Inquisitor rolled into a ball as he pitched himself backward, springing away in a gymnastic maneuver he had taught himself after watching a pair of Death Cult assassins earning their names. The springing withdrawal allowed him to evade maiming or death at the hands of the burning green sword which spun through the air, tearing molten furrows into the ground where Tar had just been laying. The Inquisitor landed in a crouch that saw his thin-bladed black rapier drawn out into the faltering rain. He knew what he would find waiting for him even before his dark eyes met those of his attacker. A tan-skinned human Jedi leered from between a tangle of dreadlocks strewn across a grinning face.
See, I will fully admit, I know of this character. I know he was a focus of an entire comic series, and he's one that did technically survive Order 66 because he had already kind of effed off at that point. But I don't know anything about his actual character. How he acts, what he's like, how he just works in general. I know nothing about this guy. And I'm assuming it's him because he's the one we're literally seeing in the image right now. So if him smiling in battle or leering through the dreadnoughts is a weird choice of words, I have no idea. I don't know anything about his character. This is all kind of new to me.
A single yellow tattooed line striping the bridge of the man's nose and underlining each of his intense, faintly yellow eyes. His extended hand was empty until the spinning blade of his light-based power sword returned to it with a snap.
Yep.
The Jedi was in his own crouch, blade held horizontally as it sizzled in the cold drizzle. Beneath and just behind the man was the bisected corpse of the Vox officer, who must have seen the man approaching and saved Tarweiler's life at the expense of his own.
Too bad.
At first, Tar had assumed he had been found by yet another Jedi in the same way as before, but this was proven false seconds later as his eyes began to notice the descending bodies and blades of the Republic's witch knights. They glided down from on high by the powers of the warp, falling upon the guardsmen around them with swords of merciless...
Because they were coming from what Gax was doing, and his previous action was setting up the trap where they were dropping buildings. So it makes sense that they're the ones following him. Wait, did they stop and get caught only because they were helping Tarweiler? Huh. Because there was also the roadblock set up at this area, I think.
Pitiless
Unless I'm
light.
thinking of a different location.
And, looking back into the eyes of his newest opponent, Tar could see that the warrior had drunken deeply of the warp's dark depths, for they reeked of its maligned power.
Oh yes, the reek. Smells like home. It had to be said. Weiler has no right to say anything about people being warp anything. Granted, I mean, hypocrites, so of course he wouldn't get that.
You look like someone important. That's really very surprising, given how inhuman you look, said the Jedi, slowly rising, lazily spinning his saber.
Yep.
Humanity is defined by the spirit more than by the flesh.
And while technically that's completely true, he's not helping his case right now.
Tar said, beginning to blur, preparing for battle. The Jedi shrugged, strolling to the left, away from the cover the Vox officer had been making use of, distancing himself.
I have no idea where
from
this
that
image is from.
impediment. If you say so. Now, listen well to what I say. Surrender. Right now. It's the only chance you'll get. I can promise you humane treatment. You and whoever else joins you.
Fan, are you trying to do a Cajun accent on this one? I don't know. It's like every few words, it's like, we're going to do something down south, like. Also, I can't do a Cajun accent, so just assume that sounded like one, even though it really isn't. Oh, and Nomu said Voss is edging closer to the dark side. Ah, yes. This is the episode about Jedi edging. I'm sure that won't ever come out wrong in any way, shape, or form.
Said the light-wielding warrior. The Inquisitor laughed in response.
And I invite you to take a knee and lay down your arms. I promise you a quick death if you do.
Tar answered, his grin wide and monstrous. The Jedi shrugged again, though this time the movement was little more than a bob of his shoulders. All right, then I'm afraid I'm going to have to do to you what I've done to every other Force wielder I found from your empire.
Fail to kill them by dropping buildings on them?
Don't say I didn't warn you. He said, hopping lightly on his toes before beginning to close with Tar.
Also, has he met
The
anyone else
Inquisitor
other than
swept his
Gaxon?
sword out in open challenge before driving in point first. The blow appeared physical, yet it was nothing but a mask, a veneer covering the true strike beneath it.
Oh?
As his blade moved forward in its predictable path, Tar lobbed forth an invisible javelin of screaming energy towards the Jedi.
Oh.
A bolt of concentrated suffering and sorrow Tar had drawn and saved from his most bedraggled victims.
Ah.
The Inquisitor could see the moment his hidden attack connected, well ahead of the pointed pinnacle of his bladed lunge. The Jedi had fallen into a lower stance once more, blade prepared to parry, when his expression rippled,
Because the attack was a fake,
changing
yeah.
like the surface of a previously still pond, going from a smirk of assured confidence to a look of sudden shock. And just like that,
Tarweiler had the fool.
Oh?
Or so he thought.
What?
But the man's blade continued its parry, his feet shuffling with coordinated intent before
he's
he
throwing it
moved
off or ignoring
in,
it.
not away. The lithe, lethal form of the Jedi adopted bizarre, precise movements which gracefully turned the Inquisitor's blow aside, almost pulling him past.
Because Tarweiler, yeah, that would do it. For all his power, he's fought against people who did different fights. It is weird that he overpowered Ayla so weird. Or is Voss just more powerful than Ayla? I don't know. Maybe he's better trained. Maybe he's more experienced. I really don't know. This is one of those things where I just... I don't know nearly enough about this. Oh, hey, we actually got a whole 11 likes on the episode. Nice. Thanks, everyone.
Past the warrior's dervishing
Voss is a
body,
special
leaving
Jedi?
him more and more exposed. The challenger released
know
his
anything about him.
burning sword of light, catching it in his other hand as he continued to twist, snapping the blade out of the air and swinging it across Tarweiler's lunging body. The Inquisitor's...
So, a few things in the chat that I think need to be read. One, Voss was Ayla's master, so... Oh, okay. Two, and that guy just had an Inquisitor casually blowing a Jedi away. And nothing else sus was ever said in this stream.
Warp-accelerated mind struggled to understand the feint, to understand how the man had taken his lance of pain without so much as stumbling. The Jedi's shocked expression melted in the course of a second, becoming a wicked grin of born teeth and triumphant, fiery eyes. Eyes which
he's
shone
going
between
full dark
dark
side.
dreadlocks like flames within the abyss.
He just got
The
corrupted by
change
that.
snapped Weiler back to his instincts in the final second, twitching his thoughts in a last hope, activating a medal on his chest which
Medal?
doubled as a safety device.
Of what?
It was meant for avoiding ranged attacks predominantly, and using it like this was dangerous. But he had no time to even
A
think,
halo?
barely any time to activate it. The
Perseus?
blade connected with Tar's side, scorching the man and biting into him effortlessly. Then there was a flash, and the Inquisitor was gone, reappearing in the same instant, upside down and 5 feet in the air, to the...
He has a personal teleportation device that he uses to dodge attacks? Okay, sure. That is a level of ridiculous that only can work in 40K, because anyone else like, we have personal teleportation. I'm going to use it to just move myself out of the way of anything throwing at me. I mean, sure, I guess a shield would work too, but they could keep aiming at you. This one, they can't hit you because you're out of the way automatically. This is so ridiculous. I actually kind of love it. It definitely looks like something that was technological from the Dark Age that was just completely bastardized by 40K, and it's kind of awesome because of that.
left of where they had begun. He barely had the
it's Eldar
sense to
tech?
catch himself, rolling into a low...
Wait, it's an actual device introduced in the first Sciaphus Kane book. Oh! Goddamn. And it's an Elder Spider generator. Because the Eldar spiders, the warp spiders, were the one who dropped around through the warp. And he's a radical inquisitor, so it makes sense that he would have things that aren't human. Huh. Cool usage there.
crouch and hissing, body dripping still despite the death of the rain. He clutched his side. The 2.5-inch wide cut there becoming a brand of pure agony, though it had been cauterized shut. The sun began to cut beams of light back into the sky, making the black-eyed Imperial squint as the Jedi stood, blade flourishing in his stance, grin still widely displayed as he reoriented on the Inquisitor. Tar grit his teeth, but was nonetheless thankful that he had been repositioned in the air and not into the floor beneath them. Had he tried that in a room with a ceiling... slippery, aren't you?
Yeah, teleporting into the ceiling would be bad.
How did you do that?
Magic.
The Inquisitor snapped in response.
Space magic.
My mind lance. How did you... What did you do? He demanded again.
It's funny.
Huh.
Needs salt.
Mind lance. Oh, You mean your little dark side magic just now? I assume this means you haven't encountered Vapad before.
God,
the man
smug
said as he drew closer.
The smug is intense.
The Inquisitor tried to rise, but the pain from his saber wound almost drew the waking world out of him, and he was forced to remain on his knees, barely able to move at all.
I find this really interesting because right now, so much of Wyler is built up as the monster who pretended to strength, but then was hiding a good deal of it. We saw him basically beat down Ayla. We saw him. His stream died. Have I ever mentioned I hate Comcast? Because I do. I really do. Fuck Comcast. Let's see, is it back? Okay, looks like it's back now. Sorry about this, guys. I'm going to try and finish the episode, but it's going to suck if it doesn't let me do that because Comcast. The tagline is Comcast. Someone had to make everything else look better by comparison. Or Spectrum. At least we're not Comcast. Or Frontier. At least we're not Comcast. Those are apparently horrible internet services that are still not Comcast. Yep. Damn you, Comcast. Completely different company there. Comstar is way more competent. But as I was saying early on, I kind of like how all of this is building up Wyler, but then as soon as he's encountering something that he can't expect, it's throwing him off massively. The idea of Vapad, someone who could just tank his psychic abilities, for example, is surprising him. And while I think Wyler, if he's on his main feet and not on the back foot like he's right now, might be much stronger, he's really being built up someone really strong. But because Voss is now one-upping him, we're building up Voss. But specifically because he's going full red-eye, corrupt Sith aspect, I'm wondering if this is going to change something somehow. Either it's a fight that Wyler's going to win and horrible things are going to happen, but convince him that maybe he needs to take this a lot more seriously, as opposed to, we need to just destroy everything to show unity is necessary. I said I was going to stop trying to imitate Wyler. I should stop. It hurts. It physically hurts. Or if this is going to be Voss taking over a role as antagonist by beating Wyler. I don't know yet, but I kind of want to find out where it goes.
He kicked back and away as best he could, though the Jedi kept pace with him casually. Vapad! The Inquisitor spat. The Jedi nodded. Yup, Vapad. I'm not even all that good at using it, but it's enough, he said before halting suddenly. The Inquisitor kept scrambling back, and when he was not pursued, he looked around, half expecting to find a Grox bearing down on him. Instead, Commissar Tyrandor strode towards Tarwyler's fallen form, dropping a stem pack into the Inquisitor's lap as he passed the man, chainsword held forward with one hand, drawing a las pistol with the other.
You serious? Tandor literally sees the Jedi who just manhandled an Inquisitor an Inquisitor throwing around psychic power, although that might not have been visible. Why is Fan talking about owning Robert Baratheon and Pubaru? I thought it said Peraba for a second. I was like, okay. I'm not going to ask. It's probably too weird to find out. But the Inquisitor's down. Jedi standing over him gloating because Sith aspect is taking over. And the Commissar is like, I can take him. This guy's dead. There's no other way.
Enough for two, I hope.
Or he's obscenely
the Commissar
competent.
Said,
Could go either way.
Chainsword as Tar took the
it's only a chainsword. He can't even block with that.
The Jedi still smiled, though his eyes had hardened and the turn of his lips had become less triumphant and more vicious as his kill was interceded. Tarwyler was panting, feeling heat flaring up from his injected leg and filling the rest of his body with a pulsating, numbing flame.
Also, for all the things I say that I misread in completely unintentional ways, I'd like to point out in the chat right now, Fan is saying, can you hear that sound? That's the sound of Tandor's balls swinging as he walks up. Still expecting him to die. Oh, and Fan was talking about his dogs, one named Robert Baratheon. Okay, I thought the pig was named Baratheon for a second. I was like, wow, that's kind of dark.
I'll see what I can do for you. The Jedi said.
And he then corrected me, it's Atreus, Ahsoka, and Dio. That's even more dark. Dog named Dio. Please don't tell me you found the dog in the oven a few times by accident. Oh, dear God.
As he began to circle to the left again. Inquisitor, Tyrandor said, voice tight. You need to escape. I have a modified chimera waiting for you further up the road. They have your pilot stabilized inside. Take it and run. The commissar said.
Oh my God.
Tar scowled and slowly stood, wincing from the damage at his side and working some of his warp arts over the wound. He was hardly an adept healer, but it was better than nothing. And
no, I mean, he's already corrupted, so the warp might let him get away with it, but in a lot of cases, nothing is sometimes better than anything you're not really good at when it comes to the warp. I'm going to disagree on that one.
Feeling the nerves near the worst of the damage would help him fight. Jakal and Omni Kraden were still waiting for him inside the outpost, and so turning back now was not an option.
Because he can't retreat, and he loses.
Negative, Commissar. You've saved my life twice now.
And
I
that's a
will
good
not let
excuse.
that jet mature any further.
Tar growled as he called his fallen rapier back into his hand.
Oh, he could do the retrieval
and
trick too.
staggered into line beside the red and black garbed Imperial commander, raising said weapon.
Formidable though he may be, we can defeat this witch together.
The Inquisitor added. You wouldn't put any credits on that if you had any sense.
I'm not. I really am not. Also, I'm still rooting for Tandor to somehow survive this while the other two get their asses handed to them by each other. Just throwing it out there. That seems like the best option right now.
I've tangled with Sith Lords, Jedi Hunters, and surprisingly spry bounty hunters. Yet here I stand. And I'll even let you in on one little secret. As scary as I may be, I'm not the only one who can use Vapor. Hell, I'm not even the best one at it.
You already said
not
that,
even
though.
close. The Jedi boasted, shoulders laid back in a casual posture. And I'll tell you another. You'll never see the blades of either of the two Jedi who can beat me at this game.
Two? I mean, one of them's obviously Windu, but who is the other one? This is just me not knowing something about Star Wars lore. It's probably obvious to anyone who knows more about this, but right now I'm just going, huh. I don't know.
Because you stopped playing. Right here. Right now.
Doubt it. And they move on to Saffron. Oh!
Saffron felt himself fading.
I forgot they had someone else doing audio as well. So they got a new voice for him. Oh.
His consciousness wavering even as he contended with the remaining Jedi. He was so close, so close. He knew he should withdraw, should find solace. Yet his enemy was all but vanquished, and he would not return to his master with words of retreat.
I wonder if this is the point where he realizes the warp isn't actively trying to eat him right now. Because I've pointed this out a few times. Saffron is a psyker. He's crazy competent. He has the mental fortitude of a psyker who is a space marine, which is basically to say a lot. But I'm wondering if now that he's at his end of the rope, he feels like there's nothing left. If he goes for that burnout technique, it's like, fuck it all, I'm taking you with me. But then realize, oh wait, my soul isn't being nommed on. There's no pushback. So the obscene level of control he's using isn't necessary. I mean, somewhat. Oh, and Fan just said the three Jedi who know how to use VOD are Mace Windu, Depa Billaba, and Quinlan Vos. Wait, does that mean Depa Billaba was actually better at Vapad than Vos? Huh. I guess she was really powerful. I don't know anything about her. Yeah, it's just being pointed out. My knowledge of Star Wars is much more lacking than I thought it is. A lot of this series does that. Still, more things to find out later.
There was no retreat. There was no surrender. Saffron would not allow himself to fail this creed. But even so, fury and frenzy would not be enough to carry him through. He took a defensive stance, allowing the Jedi to come to him instead of he to them. Using both hands, he held his stave wide, catching their strikes and measuring their movements. Both were wounded and slowed by their injuries, but none more than Saffron himself, who felt the blood vessels in his eyes bursting as he strained to remain mobile.
Damn. Because he
Obi-Wan
did get
was
stabbed through
carrying
the
a limp,
chest.
his healed shin still evidently ailing him as he tried to stand on it, and Mace Windu was burned, with small clumps of painfully molten but hardening metal fused into spots on his robe and skin.
Ow.
Most of the Jedi had escaped by now, but even so, if Saffron could crush these last two, their order would follow. If not literal truth, then in spirit. But he was fighting with just one heart, and with two of his lungs pierced and filling with blood.
Okay, one. Do Space Marines have more than two lungs? Because right now he's saying two of his lungs, implying there's more than that. I'm sorry, this is a weird technical thing right now, just because the implication is that there's more than that. And again, Space Marine, they have two hearts. Why not have 3 or 4 lungs? I don't think so, but sure, why not? I do like how they're showing that he's taken a lot of damage right now.
It oozed from his mouth and out of his wound, and even then, the only thing that kept him upright was his telekinesis.
Makes sense
Inside the bloody hole left by the saber which had pierced his heart, he forced the mostly ruined muscle to continue beating, painfully massaging it with his powers, while capping the holes as best he could. It was the roughest of patches, but it sufficed, with the help of his second heart, to keep him upright. Having 3 lungs saved him from suffocation, but only just.
Okay, so yeah, 3 lungs.
The result was a man who needed to use all his psychic focus to keep himself from dying of heart failure, all the while dueling 2 skilled but wounded opponents. The fight would not last much longer now. Obi-Wan came in high, Mace Windu low. In response,
I just realized early on when it was just one or the other fighting, I think I said it'd be really cool if Obi-Wan and Mace Windu work together, because they have the sword and shield aspect going, where Obi-Wan is a great defender for himself and others, and he's excelling at that, but he could never punch back. And Windu is the exact opposite, because right now he is able to punch, but he wasn't nearly as good on the defensive. Together, they probably work much better, as long as they don't get in each other's way, and Windu doesn't get corrupted, which is kind of what it looked like Fan was aiming towards.
Saffron attacked Obi-Wan, relying on the warrior's instinct to drive him back into the defensive once he saw the stave being swung towards him, intending for Kenobi to dodge away. It happened just as Saffron had predicted, with the Jedi abandoning his attack to bend backwards, choosing to evade in place of parry or block to spare his wounded shin. Harnessing that momentum, Saffron pivoted, continuing the swing to intercept with Mace Windu while sweeping with his left leg, aiming that one for Kenobi. Again, the Jedi Guardian avoided the strike, though Mace did not avoid his. Catching the blade on a hard-locking block, the Bald Master pushed, and Saffron gave way, knowing that Kenobi was still recovering from avoiding his leg sweep, and therefore isolating Windu for a few precious seconds. Saffron held his breath, blood gushing in a sudden torrent from his mouth and wound as he released his hold, redirecting his psychic force into acceleration, trading a rapid flurry of blows with Windu before Obi-Wan could step in again.
Trying to get one of them alone.
The Jedi, but the Master did the same, expressing strength far beyond what was natural as he met blade with stave and gauntlet with fist. Saffron felt his sight flickering, his reflexes slowing in spite of himself. "Go down!" Windu bellowed, agony ripe on his features as his skin and muscles flexed against the fused bits of metal across his body, tearing and blistering, filling him with as much pain as exasperation.
Yeah, that sounds painful.
Saffron sneered, but the expression fell away as Obi-Wan joined in. He retracted his speed and Windu backed off with a hard gasp, allowing Kenobi to step back in. The librarian nearly swooned, clenching his staff hard to bring back his focus, hammering down on the Jedi Master, but unable to breach what remained of his defenses before Mace drove in again. The Space Marine decided then to focus on Windu, the one.
That's an odd choice. See, before we had a general background march, but then...
Unable to breach what remained of his defenses before Mace drove in again. The Space Marine decided then to focus...
Fan just transitioned into what sounds like a cover of Duel of the Fates. That is a very specific phrasing, or not phrasing, score for Star Wars, considering it was first used and as probably was the best part of Phantom Menace. Come on, let's be honest here. Even when Phantom Menace was the kicking, well, I guess the whipping boy is the correct term, for the Star Wars movies, admittedly I think it's better than that, but only because I didn't like the one after it. That's just me. I think that Duel of the Fates was one of the best ones, where it was the fight scene with Maul. But here, though, does that mean we're about to see the end of the fight rather than another continuation?
The one who had dealt so much damage to him already.
Is this the best you can do? Here I stand, heartless, lungs full of blood, and weary of a day from slaughtering your pathetic order, and still you struggle.
Single
What
librarian.
hope have you, if this is all you have to offer?
Saffron mocked.
They won't
Obi-Wan
even last the
ignored
year.
the
Oh,
remark
wait.
completely, falling into serenity, but not Mace Windu. Though he did not respond directly with his words, his anger grew and he pressed in harder.
So the taunt worked because Windu's corrupting himself with Vapad. And of course, Kenobi, admittedly at this point, Kenobi could probably solo this guy. Not easily and not without hurt, but he could probably draw on the Force to keep himself up long enough for just sheer attrition to win. Which actually makes me think that this might be a problem, considering Windu is not pulling that.
The epistolary grinned, seeing his chance beginning to emerge. They exchanged a few more blows before both parties backed off, each man barely on their feet.
Too weak to finish the task at hand.
He's taking the
The
prompt.
Space Marine panted through
Or
deadly
the bait.
exhaustion. I don't see you putting an end to this task either, said Mace Windu, eyes blazing.
I don't know, he seems to have done a pretty good job already.
Wings of fiery light. To his surprise, the Marine laughed, loud and exaggerated, extending his arms toward the smears and bodies which remained all around them.
Yeah.
Blood seeped from between his teeth,
I think he
coloring
did
his
his job.
chin as he made the hideous sound and spread his legs a bit more, wavering only slightly.
Then you should look closer, Jedi. I've been ending tasks like you all day.
He boomed. Windu gripped his saber and raised it, eyes wide with unrelenting rage. He roared and charged forward, not waiting or
he's gonna get
signaling to the
himself in trouble.
recovering Obi-Wan. Master Windu, wait!
Nope.
Kenobi yelled, but it was too late to stop him. Mace charged in and forced Obi-Wan to follow, half-cocked. Saffron grinned a brilliant red
He
smile
separated them just
and
by
threw
talking at
himself
them.
toward them.
God damn,
meeting
Windu.
the two warriors halfway, surprising both. Again, Obi-Wan fell into his defensive instincts, and Mace fell into his offensive ones.
But
Saffron knew he had but one chance to finish this quickly, or
the worst part is it's definitely going to be Windu's fault when it ends. Whether that's their victory or not, and I'm at this point still hedging more towards Saffron winning, even if it's a Pyrrhic victory for the Star Wars side. I think Saffron, no, he slaughtered so many of them. It's his win regardless at this point.
his endurance would fail before the Jedi did. He exchanged
Maybe
another
Windu's
flurry of
endurance.
blows with the Jedi Master.
Obi-Wan could
But
probably
this
make
time,
it.
as Windu's companion made to rejoin the fight, Saffron intentionally exposed himself for a strike. It was a trap, and one he feared would be too obvious. But true to his
Windu's
aggression, Mace Windu seized on it the instant he could.
Yep.
The Corran Master bellowed, voice dripping in vicious desire as he plunged his purple blade into Saffron's armor, piercing it over the Marine's right rib plate and burning through it with the blow.
Oh, he took the
lancing his
hit.
already wounded lungs once more. But before Mace's blade arm could be withdrawn, it was suddenly locked, seized by Saffron's left fist. The librarian releasing his
Goddamn.
stave altogether, one hand grasping Mace's forearm and holding him there, while the other hammered down to pulp the Master's head. Ooh. No! Obi-Wan cried, moving faster than he'd ever had before, faster than he ever moved since. Blade falling from his own hands as he threw himself into a lunge, tackling Mace from the left and throwing the both of them out of the way, wrenching Mace's arm painfully out of Saffron's grip, breaking it.
Yes!
Saffron
Down an
roared
arm.
triumphant as he followed the trajectory of the two with his eyes. Denied their footwork, blades, and defense, Saffron took his chance and relinquished his telekinetic heart once more in order.
I mean, the footwork, yeah, but their blades can just be pulled right back unless he's adept enough to stop it midway. And for all his power, he's more brute forcing it than the subtlety to do a lot of what the Jedi do.
In order to extend his hands out, issuing forth a torrent of demonic lightning which spilled from his hand and...
Fan, I just need to ask, are they by a giant window at this point? Are we really doing this with Windu and a essentially Sith equivalent right now, at least as far as he cares about? Lightning, I cannot speak today. Throwing a lightning bolt at Windu. I mean, all we need right now is Anakin to walk in, and it's just, we've done it, man. We're just right there.
And towards the Jedi. Kenobi hit a pillar with Master Windu still in his arms, attempting to rebound and escape away, but his weakened shin failed to support him, and the hesitation born from that doomed them both.
Oh.
Kenobi and Windu began to scream as the sneaking bolts of warp power caught them, beginning to cook the two of them alive. Obi-Wan curled and flailed, trying to crawl away but losing all control of his body. All the while, Saffron laughed, adding his other hand, roasting the Jedi as he did so. It lasted all of 5 seconds, and then stopped abruptly.
Why?
There was a flash and an odd sound that neither Saffron nor the other Jedi had ever heard before.
What?
Kenobi was surprised to find himself still alive and breathing.
I don't know what's about to happen, but that's a very unique thing for Fan to specifically say. A sound neither side had heard before. Wait. No. He didn't say neither side. He said Kenobi or Saffron.
And an odd sound that neither Saffron nor the other Jedi had ever heard before.
Oh, no. He said other Jedi. Okay. So that it also includes Windu. It's weirder in all contexts that Saffron hasn't heard it, because anything that might happen right now is something I'd assume he would have heard from other just basic warp shenanigans. So it's going to be unique to this world, but not something that came up.
Kenobi was surprised to find himself still alive and breathing, gasping out a puff of smoke and, with trembling exertion, looking up towards his assailant. There he stood, tall and confused, blinking as he stared first at his now powerless hands, and then down lower, the nearly foot-wide hole that had appeared in his chest.
Another one?
Without falling, but beginning to falter, the Marine turned around to look behind himself, only to grunt loudly as another brilliant fount of energy emerged from behind him and struck him again, growing the hole even wider, leaving no room for his 2 hearts or 3 lungs in the empty...
Oh, I just remembered! They had the entire build-up with the librarian, the actual doing the job librarian, building her gun at the scene of the battle. Oh my God. Does she... Wait, does she have a gun? Is her lightsaber literally a gun? Oh my God. It's probably not actually a gun, but she did...
Burnt space that was his chest. This did force Saffron to his knees. Cannon. The Marine collapsing like a puppet with his strings cut, barely staying up on his hands. An enormous gout of chemical-smelling blood drooled from his mouth and began to well thickly around his wound. Still, he saw with clear eyes the face of his killer.
The old one he dismissed.
Old woman. She had assembled some kind of melt-a-gun behind his back, the one with a range that far surpassed any he'd yet seen.
I mean, considering the average range of melt-a-guns, that's really not saying much.
She stood there, weapon raised and sighted as though she would shoot him again, though after a second or two she looked up from the leveled gun.
Well done,
Saffron croaked.
Name?
He added, choking on blood and a lack of oxygen. In response, she raised one of her gray eyebrows. Windu stood up at that moment, cradling his broken arm and walking towards them, standing over the fallen Astartes and releasing his wounded limb, calling his saber to his hand, activating it and lifting it.
He's going to take the head.
Wait, said Jocasta, and with great difficulty, Mace held his blade raised but still.
Your name. I would know it,
the Marine said, pushing air up his ruined throat with the power of the warp. I am Jedi Master Jocasta Nu. Take my name to your god, and pray he does not force me to send more of you with it, said the rigid old woman. Saffron laughed, making a horrible sound which forced him to vomit forth a whole pool of unnatural blood.
Are you master among these Jedi?
Librarian.
He panted, arms
and
trembling.
He'll laugh at that.
She shook her
Killed
head
by another
no,
librarian.
Though he could no longer see her, only hear her. I am Chief Librarian of the Jedi Order, she said to the dying man. The words seemed to shock him, but then he smiled one last time and began to laugh again.
Yeah.
First with what little false air he had left to push into his vocal cords, and then silently as he lost the strength to continue. He looked up at her, eyes blood red, all the vessels having burst. He mouthed something to her,
Chief Librarian to
having
another.
no power left to give air to his words, and then gradually fell still. Mace waited and then slowly lowered his blade, stepping away from the mountainous corpse of the Astartes. His eyes did not leave the dead man, reaching out with his mind to confirm his death, yet was rebuffed by the ambient wards which persisted in the librarian's armor.
They're still around. Damn.
What did he say to you? Mace Windu asked Master Jocasta Nu. She grimaced and raised the barrel of her weapon towards the dome's ceiling, convinced the Marine was dead at last. She looked at Mace, though he did not look back. He said, "Stifle that guttering flame of hope, for I am not alone, and I am not the greatest of my brothers. 2 more stand above me, and they shall teach you the lesson I could not."
One of them is probably Thune, so that. Who else, though? We haven't really got much information. My only assumption, at least in general terms, would probably be if the Crimson Razor, sorry, my apologies, if the Red Team has the equivalent of a chaplain. Just because if it's not the chapter master, who it probably is one of them, then it definitely would be the chaplain, is my next guess for someone. And considering how insane and martial these guys are, a chaplain would be the most likely option. So it's someone we haven't met yet, most likely. I'm looking forward to that,
said Jocasta Nu. Mace turned then, finally.
Davik Thune is the other guy, isn't it? It's Orion. God, I cannot keep names straight. Ah.
Looking away from the Marine. Did he say what that lesson was? He asked her.
Death.
The wizened librarian nodded stiffly. Mace waited, but she did not speak right away. Instead, she looked from him to an empty space on a distant wall, seeming grayer and older than he had ever seen in that moment.
Wait, everyone's pointing out that this is a librarian, not the chief librarian. Oh. Well, now, I was unaware of that fact, and honestly, no, he never claimed to be a chief librarian. Fan always addressed him as a librarian. I just figured he was the one because he's the only one we've seen so far. But most of the Astartes aren't there. Yeah.
Moment. And? He asked Master Nu. She snapped her eyes back to him and straightened. His lesson was, hope is the first step on the road to disappointment.
God damn, Fan. That was intense. I mean, every step of the way, that was a crazy episode. And I was honestly wondering what that line was. And I was kind of worried there because disappointment is bad. And hope in the Imperium is always bad. Oh, it's a Dawn of War quote? Oh, okay. It's a real librarian saying even. Huh. I actually wasn't aware of that. But I was really worried to be something along the lines of hope is the first step towards damnation, because admittedly in 40K that would probably literally be a problem considering, you know, actual gods trying to eat your soul. So yeah. But I love this. Fan, you did a great job. I love that fight. And honestly, I'm still giving the win to I keep saying Davik. Why do I keep saying that for everyone? And I'm thinking Davicus, which isn't even Star Wars or 40K. That's Ravaged Star. But I'm thinking he won. As much as he died, he won. He got his mission done. Everyone got slaughtered, except for a few who are more plot relevant. But there is so many fewer people here. And it really just comes down to how is the Jedi army on the surface doing here? I don't really know what the distribution was. I'm pretty sure it was mentioned, but I'm actually pulling a blank on that. That's on me. Dude, I want to know what comes next. I want to know more about that gun. People mentioned in the chat it was like a mini Death Star gun, in which case, how come those aren't more common? You know what? No, probably because Palpatine didn't want anyone else to have it, because then they would have it, and he wouldn't. Oh, and Davlin Thune, not Davik, sorry, is the Razor's chapter master. Ah, okay. Thanks, Ripoff. I just saw the time. There's 2.5 hours of stream. Holy shit. So apparently I should have stopped streaming an hour and a half ago. I thought it was only going to be an hour. I did not. I need to go apologize to my wife. Crap baskets. More importantly, though, this was so freaking cool. Oh, it was actually Davik. Wait, Fan, did I have his name right the entire time? I did not know I could do that. Sorry, I'm just so used to being wrong when it comes to names. I don't assume to ever be right. This is weird. Oh, more importantly, for everyone watching, thanks. Fan, you did a great job. Thank you for writing this. And for everyone else, especially for the people who donated, anyone who became a member, thanks. It actually does help, especially since January really sucks. On the other hand, it's a good excuse to do these more. Yeah. Also, I have been holding this in the background, and I'll see if I can put it up. This has been working on. So, yeah, people ask me to show models more often, and apparently the camera's actually going to show it. Yeah. Unfortunately, I found out gray isn't a great thing to put down because it looks like I haven't painted, even though I literally base painted the entire thing blue. So, that's the thing. Figured I can do that. More importantly, I'm going to go and apologize to my wife for taking much too long. So, yeah, I'm in trouble. I can see she... Oh, she sent me multiple text messages I ignored while recording. Oh. Oh, I'm in danger. Shit. More importantly, I'm going to run and beg for forgiveness and grovel a bit. So I'll see you guys at the end of whatever happens. Maybe I'll stream again. Maybe I'll die in a ditch. It could go either way. I'm going to buy her cheese tonight. My wife is easily bribed with cheese. Unfortunately, I have to survive to get it. It's always the downside. So I'll see you guys then. Thanks again. And again, link below, video. Hit it up. Fan did a great job. Make sure to go leave a like if you haven't already. Hit up the video. Just let it play on your computer just to give him watch time. He did a great job. And I'll see you in the next one. Adios. What am I doing? Oh, button.